So I'm going to ask one more question and then I'm going to let you go. But
That's okay.
I swear, I swear. Um, Welcome to the RFP podcast, where courage meets community. We are here to uplift LGBTQIA plus first responders and their allies with real talk, bold stories, and unapologetic pride. Whether you wear a uniform, love someone who does, or simply cares about building a more inclusive world, you are in the right place. So let's spark some change and break some stigmas and have a little fun along the way. I am one of your hosts, Katie. I am a licensed clinical professional counselor and a Leo spouse.
I am your other host. I am Nicola, EMS Lieutenant and President of Responders for Pride. And we are excited for our next episode of our Spotlight series, where we shine light on the lived experiences, the leadership, and resilience of our LGBTQIA plus voices in the responder world. From the front lines to the home front, these are stories that are raw, real, and ready to inspire. And with that, I'd like to welcome our guest, Public Safety Officer, Christina Ellis.
Thank
Hey,
you.
how
Hi,
are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing well. I am doing well. Welcome to the show. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
being here. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do as a public safety officer?
Yeah, I'm a public safety officer for the Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And we are one of, if not the largest true public safety agencies in the nation, in that every single officer is a sworn police officer, a firefighter, and a medical first responder. So on any given day, we're handling calls for service related to police matters. We could go to a fire and work on the fire. We can get called to any kind of medical emergency. So we're unique in that way, in that, I wear a police uniform, I drive a police car, but in the trunk, I have my fire gear. And so if a fire goes out, then I just drive right and I meet the fire engine there and switch out and fight the fire. And then when we're done, I take that off, switch back to my police uniform and go back to handling calls for service. So,
Katie's
uh,
face right now.
what's that?
Katie's face right now is just
I know,
You're
right?
blowing my mind, Chris. I didn't know that that was a thing.
Yeah, so we've been doing that since the 80s, our department, and we've been very successful at it. And that's what really attracted me to our department is that, well, I feel like I've had an amazing career, and I feel like I've actually had multiple mini careers within my career,
Oh,
because
really?
when I've been a patrol officer, I was a detective for 13 years. Obviously saw a lot of vicarious trauma through that. And after about 13 years, I was like, I need to do something else. And so I went into the fire station and started driving the fire truck, and I joked that instead of the one finger wave, I started getting the five finger waves again because everybody loves the firefighters, right?
Right.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so that restored my faith in my career. And then at some point my home life changed and my wife and I got divorced and I couldn't do the 24-hour schedule. So I went back to wearing the police uniform, after 16 years of not,
Whiplash.
which was very frightening to put that back on again. But I jumped right in and fell in love with that again. And my current role is because I've been doing this job for 26 years. It'll be 26 years in August. And I have enough seniority now that I'm currently the court officer, which is, you know, people say it's kind of a retirement gig in that,
You've earned it.
I
I've
was gonna
earned
say,
it, right?
oh, that gig.
26 years of handling calls. And so now I work Monday through Friday, holidays and weekends off. I go in, I help arraign everyone who's been arrested the day before. And, so my days are much calmer, but much more family friendly.
I love that for you.
Yes. And then last year I was actually named. So in addition to that, I'm also the LGBTQ Police Liaison for our department. And so I'm able to work on that as well as maintain my current role.
Wow. Yeah, yeah, I'm I swear I can speak. But you've done something that's very, very rare, and that has rendered me a little bit speechless in the sense of I'm like wrapping my head around this career that you've had of just the multitudes, the changing roles, the vast lived experiences you must carry in your bones and on your back
It's almost
is
like you can put your picture as the responders for Pride because it's all of it, right? Like,
It is. It's all of it. And
all of it.
and yeah, and I have stories from every different angle of a first responder. And it is. It's been an incredible ride.
I'm wondering, Chris, you have this really unique professional experience and being a queer woman in all of those spaces. I'm kind of wondering, how has your queer identity shown up? How has your departments, your colleagues, has it varied in how you've been treated or how you've been received or what you've experienced? You've been doing this over this span of years that a lot has changed, but then also not. Things haven't changed. So like yeah, could you just share a bit about your experience being a queer woman in all of these spaces over time?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've been doing this for 26 years. So I hired on in 1999, and I was born in the 70s, grew up in the 80s. I'm a true Gen Xer, and during that time, there was no social media, there wasn't a lot of representation within the queer community. I didn't know any queer people, and so I actually didn't come out till later in life. I was in my early 20s when I finally realized I was so in the closet up till then that I didn't even know I was in the closet
Mhm.
until I met who would be my first girlfriend, and then I was like, okay, well, I'm probably not gay. I just really like her, right? That whole kind of denial thing. But so coming out in the early 90s, and then eventually finding my path to this career. When I hired on in 1999, I was still very much in the closet. And I didn't, in all of my life. I mean, my family knew, some close friends knew, but I was very much in the closet, and I wasn't comfortable coming out, particularly. And it was nothing to do with the people I worked with, right? It was a very young department. And as such, a very, I think, accepting department. And a lot of times I would get the question like, well, what's it like being a woman working there? And because obviously I was in the closet, and I was very well accepted, right? You show up, you do the job, you do it well, you're accepted. Um, and the thing with first responders, right, with police and fire and EMS, I always say we're a very unique breed in that we're the ones running to the danger, right? When everybody else is running away. We're, as a police officer, we're running to the gunfire. As a firefighter, we're running into that burning building. And that creates a unique bond, I think, that I have not experienced in any other field. And so, but for the first 5 years of my career, I was in the closet. And I feel like that made it very isolating, in that I couldn't be my true authentic self. And that when you're sitting around the station and you're sharing stories and people are talking about their vacations or the fight they had or, the anniversary dinner, and I couldn't do that. I was like, and it was, again, it was very isolating. It was a very sad time, and that I wanted to embark in this camaraderie, this closeness, because I knew, any given day, I would put my life down on the line for these people that I work with, for my community, as they would too. But I think having that queer aspect of it in the back of my mind, I had a fear, whether it was real or not. I had this fear that if I was in a situation where I was fighting for my life, would they back me up? Would they get there as quick as they can, or would they take the long way there to help me? And so, again, whether that was a real fear or something that was just that I had made up, for me, it wasn't worth the risk. And so I did live in the closet for the first 5 years. And it wasn't until my first relationship ended, and there was a lesbian who hired on, and she was younger than I was, a little bit younger. She, where I grew up in the 70s and 80s, she grew up in the 80s and 90s, and her experiences obviously were different. And so she was out, and she was living comfortably being out. And I saw her come on and be out and live out and work out, and she was respected, and it was like, oh wow, okay,
It's
well,
possible.
it's possible, right? And I knew I was respected as an officer, as a female, but seeing her be out working as a lesbian officer and being respected, it just opened up the world to me. And we actually ended up being in a relationship. And obviously, if you're dating somebody who's out, well, then you're out too. So it was the catalyst for me being out. And it was the best, decision I ever made. And I was accepted and embraced. And, there's always going to be, I think, a pocket of people who don't approve, but they were never vocal. They were never vocal about it, at least to me. And, I've always been treated with dignity and respect. So I've been very fortunate. And I will say that, having lived in the closet and worked in the closet, and now being able to work openly and authentically, has just been, it's been so fulfilling, because I've been able to have those bonds and be able to completely share myself and my personal life and build those relationships with my coworkers that, will last lifetimes. So
That's part of what I like say. Like when we go on those calls, when we're out in the incident, right? Like I say this all the time, right? Like that we're there, we're doing it as a team, we're doing it as a family. It's happening, right?
Yes.
And you
Yes.
just said it like it was around the table when everybody else was talking about their relationships, right? I think that like that's the systemic stigma that we need to beat almost, because I mean you are in Michigan, right? Like we're here
Yeah.
in Maryland. Like I hear it from people that have been in California that they lived 37 years in the closet because
Yeah.
of this thing. And like I have now been accepted. There's still policies that need to change within my department to make it more inclusive, right?
Yes. Right.
And it's like breaking that part, but like being able to be your authentic self around the kitchen table, or like when you're sitting on patrol, when you're doing those things, like I think that's where like this lies, is like breaking that stigma completely open,
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. And yeah, and I think looking back, people probably know, because you're making up stories as to like either why you're single or why you're not dating, or why you're not going to go to that function outside of work, and I didn't like it. I'm a very authentic person. I don't like to lie, especially to the people I'm working with, when, it's very intense work, and
Yeah.
you do get very close, and to be able to, or to feel like I had to hide that part of me was very unsatisfying.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was hired in 2007, and I was always out before that. But when I got hired, I didn't talk about it. Right.
Yeah.
I didn't have those, and I was getting married in 6 months. Right. And I wasn't talking
A
about
happy time.
right.
Yeah.
It was a happy time, and I wasn't talking about it. And then wasn't inviting anybody from the fire department, like things like that. So, like, and I remained in the closet for halfway in the closet, because again, like you said, they probably knew, for
Right.
about a year, right? Like, so it was, yeah. So, it definitely is nice to be able to open up those. And I mean, like you nailed it down on that, like your story, right? Nails that part down.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think, the flip side of that, having been in the closet for so long and then coming out and living authentically, I mean, that's a lot of where change is going to happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because no fault of their own, a lot of people don't have exposure to gay. I didn't, in the 80s growing up, I didn't have exposure to gay people. And so we tend to fear what we don't know, right? And so by being out and authentic and still being the same person I am, the same person that they knew, before, helps to make that change, right? To helps people to open their eyes and be like, wow, okay, I guess, I only knew what I saw in the media or what I heard about, but now I have real life interaction with a queer person, and you know what, they're not a monster. They're not, scary.
Right.
You know?
The capacity to actually start building that empathy that right, that we've talked before in other shows about how, so often those we don't know, they get deduced, right? They get reduced to these kind of bullet points that are usually seen in the media or just any kind of stigmas that have been kind of stuck on to a particular identity from, just cultural influence. But when we build those interpersonal relationships, when we have conversations when you work side by side, especially doing the bonding work that you guys do, it can change so much because systems change usually in response to those micro changes, right? It's not usually top down. It's usually like the masses are changing, and then that's what changes the higher levels of the systems. But your experience highlights a few really important things that I heard, and one is that just how just how detrimental it can be for the individual who is terrified to be out and share their authentic experiences and self with the people that are important to them, the people they're closest with, they spend the most time with. Just like you were saying, how, you know, there's such a bond among first responders in how you have to, like, literally on a daily basis, oftentimes show up and save one another's lives. You're right, like be responsible for one another's continued living.
Yeah.
And then to then go back and in those down times and those moments in between the crises, have to kind of revert inward and put up a protective shield when what you really needed was to be able to just exist
Yeah.
among everyone else, and just how detrimental that can be to your soul, to your mental health, to your emotional health. But then also, you highlighted how important it is when there are people who are able and willing to show up and exist authentically. And it kind of there's this like juxtaposition, right, around those two experiences where I think it's very understandable that if you do not feel safe or comfortable being out, that's understandable. Like you don't gotta justify that with me. I get it. And also those individuals who are able and willing to show up and be in those spaces and say, "Hey, this is who I am, and this is my family, and this is the shit we got into this weekend," and like, and just let it be normalized. It really does pave the way, and it creates that space for other people to be like, "Okay, like maybe this is something that I never thought would be possible, but maybe that could happen. Maybe my worlds could come together and maybe I could be loved and supported and accepted." So, what a powerful story you have. Thank you for sharing it.
Thanks for doing this podcast.
Truly is our pleasure.
It really is. I love hearing the stories we're hearing.
I know.
Yeah.
The best.
So like you said, you were in the closet for like 5 years on the job. If you could go back and you could give yourself advice on the first day, would you give yourself any advice? If you could, what would that be?
Oof. Um, boy, I one thing I would say, and this isn't necessarily related to, being queer, but I was always told, like, when you hire on, like, you're going to have so many great stories, like you're going to experience so many great things, like get a journal and write them down, right? Write those stories down. And I never did. And I, looking back, I wish I would have done that because at some point you'll find yourself on a podcast and people will be like, "Well, tell me about a time." And I'll be like, "Oh man, I know there was some really good stories, but I just, they all kind of blend in." Right. And, it's been an amazing career, and there are stories, but I wish I would have taken the time to really jot those things down
I feel
and
that.
made sort of a book. I made a story of my career. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
would have told myself, do it. Don't be lazy. Write that stuff down.
Actually a great piece of advice because, like you saying that, I'm like, yeah, that would have been really cool.
Right? Because
Yeah.
we experience so much, and we get called in on just the craziest things, and we get called in when people are having the worst times of their lives, right? And so to go in, and that's another thing I think I would have told myself is we are the ones that are expected to go in and fix people's problems, right? And we are going to be encountering people when they're having literally the worst day of their lives, and they may not be acting how they normally act, and to not take it personally, but they're going to take their frustrations out on us, but don't let that affect how you treat them, right? We always treat people with dignity. And that would be my second piece of advice.
And that's a hard thing. Like when you're dealing with it constantly, right? When you're dealing with people on the worst day every day.
Oh,
Right.
That like resilience to be able to kind of build that capacity to stay in touch with like this is not personal, even though they are literally calling me X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
They're spitting on me. They're attacking me. That's a
Right.
hard place to land.
It is. And being brand new, I think when you're brand new, it's like it's really hard to process that. And you do have a tendency to take it personal, but it's not, you have to when you go in and you put on that uniform, you have to, it's the uniform, right? And so I almost tried to be like, it was like a transition, it was like your superhero cape, right? It's not me anymore. It's the uniform. And that's who they see. They don't know me, and it's not personal. Um, Funny, I was actually I didn't know I wanted to be a police officer growing up, and when I went to school, I didn't know what I wanted to be. So I'm actually a theater major, and
My wife went to college for building theater sets. So, like, there's a bridge
right.
somewhere.
There is. And so I always joked that like, okay, well, I use my degree every day because even if I don't know like what I'm supposed to do, I can act like I know what I'm supposed to do. So
Yes, and yes,
it's
and
it's
yeah.
been very helpful. But yeah, I would use that going into work, and that, this is not about me. They don't know Christina Ellis. And at the end of the day, when I take that uniform off, if we were to meet on the street, we'd probably be very, very cordial to each other. But it's about the uniform. It's about the crisis that they're in. And it's not personal, and just to help them through that crisis, whether they want your help or not.
It's so interesting what you just pointed out. I want everyone listening who is like a loved one, a partner, I want you to really take that in. And if you haven't already, I want you to kind of conceptualize that time period where your loved one, your first responder loved one is getting ready to go on to shift and being curious and being soft and gentle around that process because you've probably already noticed that they start to shift. Their energy starts to shift. Their mentality, their temperament starts to shift. And that is a necessary part of preparing mentally and emotionally, and even with the nervous system, getting ready for the ride that they're about to
Yeah.
go on and holding the responsibilities that they do to literally be abused potentially in who knows what kinds of ways and have to still maintain composure, maintain responsibility, the law, all of that. And they're just the role, right? It's such an important thing that I think especially like new people who are on the job but also loved ones that like there's a whole process. There's also a decompression process when they come off shift, but that's another maybe podcast episode. We did a podcast episode on
We need to do a podcast
decompression
on
time. So catch that if you haven't already.
You say you have a lot of stories. Is there anyone that you would be willing to share?
Oh my gosh. um yeah, so there's being the first responder, being the true public safety officer. There's so many stories. Like as a detective, just I worked sex crimes for period of time, which was very taxing, emotionally, mentally. But being able to put a child sex offender, and see him sentenced to like 50 plus years, and seeing the look on that child's face is something I'll never forget. When I was in the fire station, responding to the man who had a heart attack, driving in the middle of the road, right, and just blocking traffic and doing CPR on this man in the middle of the road, and then seeing him walk out of the hospital like weeks later. Just incredible things. But there was one particular story that it was during COVID, so it was 2020. It was probably the summer 2020. We were living and policing in a new way during COVID, wearing the masks. There had been the George Floyd murder, so there was a lot of civil unrest. It was a very different time policing. And I worked, when I went back to working, putting on the uniform and being a street cop again, I worked our downtown beat. And Kalamazoo is known we have one of the first outdoor pedestrian malls. And so that's like kind of the heart of our city. And that was my kind of the center of my area. And I did a lot of foot patrol. And I was working, but at this point, a lot of the businesses were closed. They're boarded up. It was weird. It was like working in a ghost town. But I would go through and do my, my door checks, my normal routines. And on this particular day, on the mall, there's a one-way street through it, but we have this ordinance about not riding your bicycle on the mall, right, on the sidewalk. And even though there's nobody around, I'm doing my foot patrol, and I see this man riding his bike on the other side of the road, and he's probably in his early 30s. He's a Black male. And so I would typically, when I would see somebody riding your bike, I'd be like, hey, officer, I'm Officer Chris. Hey, can I just have you ride your bike or walk your bike, And he was coming down, and I'm trying to get his attention, and he's got some earbuds in. So he slows down and stops because he sees me, and he does this. So I cross the street to go to talk to him, and he's like, whoa, 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 and immediately gets defensive and whips out his phone, and he's like, no, back off, man, and I'm like, well, you couldn't hear me. I'm just coming to talk to you. And he's like, you stay right there. And I'm like, all right. And, I could tell he was had a front. He was very guarded. And so I tried to engage with him. And that's been, I think, my thing throughout the years is I've always tried to make any encounter I have with somebody a positive spin, right? Again, treating people with dignity. Even if it ends in an arrest, having that, showing the dignity and having it be a positive outcome. I mean, I've had people literally thanking me as I'm taking them to jail for treating them, right, like a human. And so I'm having this interaction with him, and I'm simply trying to explain to him, like, look, there's an ordinance, you can't ride. I'm not going to give you a ticket. I'm just asking that you get off and you walk your bike, right? And he's getting argumentative. He doesn't believe me. He thinks I'm making this up. He's recording me, so I don't shoot him, all of the things that were happening in society at the time. And I'm just like, look, it's okay. I'm recording too. I got my body camera, and so this goes on for about 5 minutes. And I realized we're not getting anywhere, right? I'm not making any headway with him. And finally I said, you know what, like, clearly you have had some very negative encounters with the police in the past, and I am sorry for any kind of mistreatment you may have received over the years. All right. I said, I'm just simply trying to let you know about this ordinance. You can believe me or not. I said, but we're not getting anywhere. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go about my day. I said, all I ask is when you get to the end of the street, you look up and you see that there is a sign that says no bikes on the mall. And so I disengaged with that encounter. And as I'm walking away, I was really like kind of upset because of the fact that I didn't make any headway there. And I didn't feel like it ended positively. And I was like, man, normally I can really talk to people. I can really
break
make
through.
some headway. break through, right? And so I just left, and I was all discouraged, and I went about my day. But it ate at me, and I felt really bad that I wasn't able to break through doing that encounter. Well, the next day I'm working, and I had a partner come up to me, and he's like, "Hey, did you have an encounter with a guy on a bike yesterday?" And I'm like, "Oh my God." And like, he must have posted the video or something, and I'm like playing in my mind. I'm like, man, I swear I treated him really good. And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, he flagged me down, and he wanted to apologize. He said he realized afterwards that he treated me really poorly, and that I had done nothing wrong, and that I had treated him with dignity and respect, and that he got caught up in the hype and everything that was going on in the country, and he took it out on me, but that I didn't deserve it. And he said I really made him think about things, and that not all cops are bad, right? And yeah, I was just like, and so it really restored that faith. And then about a month later, I ran into him in the park, and we were both a little like hesitant, but we ended up like having a 20-minute conversation. And I even said that, I was like, if we met under any other circumstances and I wasn't in this uniform, we'd probably be like really good friends. And to this day, we ended up social media, exchanging, and we still will interact with each other. And it was a really positive experience. And then I felt like I broke through, I made a difference, and that's been my whole thing, is every encounter I have, if I can somehow change people's perspectives, and that not all cops are bad, right? And that most of us really are out there trying to do the right thing, and to do good and to help people. So it was a highlight, I think, of my career, that he took the time to flag down one of my partners,
Yeah.
to apologize for the way he treated me.
Yeah. I mean, that says a lot about your character, right? Like,
Yeah.
and you kept it together even through that. And again, like you said, newer cops may have taken that
Yeah.
to
And
personally, right?
well,
And it really was the hype of the moment.
it was.
Yeah.
And I, any I look at it, and it could have gone a lot of different ways, right? He was technically in violation of a city ordinance, right? A 30-day misdemeanor. But if I'd had a chip on my shoulder or an attitude, I could have really escalated that into ordering him off his bike, get over here, give me your name, I'm going to write you a ticket, and to the point where maybe he resisted, and now we're fighting, and so it's the whole like officer discretion. And was him riding a bike on the mall and being disrespectful to me worth escalating this into something it didn't need to be? Absolutely not. But to be able to turn that into a positive encounter where maybe now he tells people, about this story, and that, hey, you know what, there was a cop out there, and she treated me like a human being, and so maybe not all cops are bad.
Butterfly effect, right? Butterfly effect.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Okay, so kudos to you. First time I've cried. Um, what a beautiful story. Thank you so much for sharing that. Also, what a masterclass in de-escalation and choices. Like you just highlighted, there is individual discretion embedded in all
Yeah.
the decision making process, right? And that's the finite, nuanced spaces where it, the volatility lives, but also where these kinds of experiences live, where things can just go so many different ways depending on how you assess, how you process the situation as the person in authority,
Right.
and make these calls that, like, I mean, you can tell in your process as you were telling that story that, you were assessing all the details and you determined, like, this is not worth escalating this situation for. I'm gonna inform him of this, just check the sign out, it's there. And then also highlighting how you walked away from that and it stayed with you. It was turning you inside out, it was twisting you up inside, that you care so much about offering those moments as many times as you can to the people you are interacting with, to highlight, like, there are there are officers out there, there are first responders out there who genuinely take on this role and live this role to be helpful, to the premise of the job, right, is to help. And that it bothered you so deeply, that this just didn't really go the way that you were hoping it was going to go, and then to have the payout be later, which I think really speaks to being able to have some patience around the idea that you don't know the difference that you make all the time in the immediate moment. Like, you, especially doing the work that you guys do, right? You're in and out. It's all such fast-paced stuff. You don't often see or hear about the ends of stories, right? You're always catching it in, like, the climax of it all.
Right.
And to have this sense of resolution, and to see that you're affecting people whether you realize it or not. And then it's just, what a powerful story. Yeah. Again, thank you for sharing it.
Yeah, thank
I
you
haven't seen
for.
her cry yet. That was definitely the first. So
I'm actually almost a little teary myself. So
I mean, it's so impactful, though, right? Like,
yeah,
she,
it really was.
I,
right?
I
And the
do.
impact that is lasting.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. This is something that has evolved into, and that's the other thing. Thank you. That's the other thing that really popped in my head, was that we were talking earlier about the importance of, being queer in first responder spaces, and how there is, right, there's reactivity, there's core beliefs, there's held assumptions about people when we don't know them, when we just know them for what, the ideas that we've created about them, the narrative that we've placed on them. And this highlights how it's the same sense of, like, you guys carry those two, both of them, at least those two things of, like, the importance of the individual, of being able to say, hey, look, I'm more than just this uniform. I'm a
Right,
whole human,
right.
and I care, and I'm trying, and I really am trying to be purposeful here. And when you break through those moments, it's a big deal, because you're either able to live authentically among your colleagues, and be well personally, because you can be who you are, and also it's in the space of your first responder work every day.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Chris, for coming on and talking with us today. We would love to have you back sometime, if that's of interest to you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
We just appreciate you so much.
No, I'm just happy to help and, try to make a difference every way I can. So,
So, with that, that's a wrap for today's episode of the RFP podcast, where courage meets community. If you were moved, inspired, or just reminded you are not alone, share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on Responders for Pride on Instagram and Facebook, and keep that conversation going. Until next time, stay proud, stay safe, keep showing up for yourself and for each other. Have a good day. Bye.
I'm making notes. I'm like, we should have a whole episode with you, with a conversation around mental health, PTSD,
yep,
if that.
happy to, happy to. But yeah, I do share that now too, with, like, especially the new kids, because it's like, you are going to experience this. You're going to experience some really bad things, and be prepared, and get a good therapist. And
That's my advice too. I mean, I'm an EMS lieutenant, so I just do EMS. I mean, I
yeah,
work in the firehouse. We go on fires. We do all the things. But I had a new guy. He's been in about a year. He comes in. And he's like, "How do you do it?" And I'm like, "Do what?" And he was like, keep it all together. I was like, "I don't.
right.
I definitely not." And he was like, "Well, you're so chill, you're so calm on the calls, like you've got it together. Like when we're talking in the station, you seem like you've got it together." I was like, "I have a really good therapist, and I have been triggered. I have PTSD, and I've been
Huh?
on a recovery journey, right? Like,
Right.
and you need to get a therapist now. Like, it's one of
Yeah.
the first things that we talk about, right? So yeah, like I do the same thing." And
And
we
it's
don't.
like you talked about that shift of going into work, you put on that front and yeah, I hold it together great at work, and like
Absolutely.
we're the people think we're sick because we're always making those like crude jokes over dead bodies and stuff because that's how we survive. And then I go home and that's when I cry, once I
Yeah.
take that suit off, I go home and then I can unload. But yeah, you've got to hold it together.
That's why we talk so much about the conditioning. That is it's behavioral conditioning, it's nervous system conditioning. Right, you I'm sure you guys see it all the time, the shift from the new people
Yeah.
where their nervous system is still operating like the dumb normal, nervous
Right.
systems that want to run, right? And then that are like, ah,
Mhm. Mhm.
and you get conditioned, and that's when it becomes that shift of like when the shit's kicking off and the chaos is kicking off, that's when you go, "Doo,"
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
the chaos might be inside, but you're doing the thing, and that needs to be understood. I'm so like passionate about having an education around understanding like what's happening, what's the mechanism, and why that's so vital for you guys to have so that you can keep doing the work that you're doing so you can survive.
Yeah.
We would be losing a lot more people just on the job if
Yeah.
you didn't have that conditioning and have that shift. Because people would be in chaos and they'd be making terrible decisions and it wouldn't work out.
Right. Are you guys going to the worldwide conference?
Yes, we're presenting there.
Oh, sweet. I'll be there.
Are you?
So,
Awesome.
yay.
We're presenting on the first day, the 6th at 12 o'clock.
First day, 12
Yeah.
o'clock.
What's so funny is that's so funny that you're going to be there. Yay. Because I had a question that I didn't get to ask today, but now I'll ask it.
Yeah.
And that because I wanted to ask, is there any kind of experience, moment, situation where you felt like your queer identity, that part of you played as a strength, as a real tool in the work? Were you ever on a call or have a situation where you felt like it made a real significant difference, just who you are, bringing who you are to the moment?
Yeah, there's been, first of all, I think the personal contacts, as being particularly with our local LGBTQ resource center. I've started to I had started going in there quite frequently. And I noticed initially a lot of a very cold reception when I would first start going in there, right? And they were on my beat. They were in that area. And so I was going into all the businesses and, hey, I'm Officer Chris. If you guys got any problems, you need anything, come to me. And I was doing that with them and I was getting a very cold reception. And I didn't fully understand because I hadn't educated myself on my own queer history. But I continued to do that, and so they started warming up to me. And I wear the rainbow bracelet. I'm like, hey, I'm one of you guys. Like let's work together. And so there's just been, I think, being queer and in the liaison role obviously gives me a little bit more credibility. But just being queer and showing up as a queer officer. I'm seeing people who, like you originally was like, I don't know, like all cops are bad. And they're starting to be like, well, Chris is okay, um, but I don't know about the other cops. And so, I've been able to make those personal connections with people. And again, we talk about the butterfly effect, right? The ripple effect. And maybe by them seeing how genuine I am and also in seeing I began to partner with the organization out front and started creating a curriculum to teach at the police academy. So we're teaching new officers about LGBTQ awareness, right? And just everything from stereotypes to a little bit of the history so they understand when maybe they're not treated so well, this is why, right? And to have some patience with that, the generational trauma, right, that comes with that. And so, I also am able to have some authenticity within the officers because they know I'm presenting as not just an officer, but as a queer woman, right? And so that's really helped along the way too. But then there's also been times I've been called in, like they initially tried to make a report and they felt like they weren't being heard. And so I've been called in after the fact where some of our organizations would contact me directly and be like, hey, we had this, can you reach out? And so I would reach out and was able to be that sort of that bridge for that liaison, that sort of victim advocate for that person and get the report going that way. So
see, these are the things that we want to highlight at the conference around our topic, which is, that it's, queer identity in public safety is not just something to burden. It's not like a liability of any kind, right? It's and not even that. It's a strength. It is an asset.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
you've just highlighted multiple examples of how your queer identity has been an asset to you in the work that you do in actually being able to facilitate your job, right? The role that you play as in law enforcement is, you actually are helping people be able to make that complaint that they want to make or that they need to make, but didn't feel safe or heard or understood when making it with someone else. So like you're facilitating the work and it's getting done and it's supporting marginalized people who historically have not had that that safety to be able to have that representation. We need more queer folks in
We
these
do.
spaces, so that this can start to become not just, oh, it's just Officer Chris, that's cool, but like, no,
Right.
there's actually a shift in the culture that people feel increasingly more connected and safe with the people who are bringing safe, facilitating safety in their role.
Right. Right. And by being authentic and being out there in this role, and even before I was officially, given this role, I would have officers come to me and, with genuine curiosity or interest because they had taken a hate crime report of a trans individual, and they wanted to know, like, how do I refer to them in the report? Like I want to do this proper and legally within the police report, but I also want to respect, that. And so that was also really encouraging to have people come to me asking me these questions, have other officers, coming, wanting to do the right thing. And obviously not all officers are going to want to do that, but if you're, by being out there and being a resource, not just for the community, but for our officers within the department, that's going to help make that change too. And the fact that they're coming and asking me, like, how do I word this,
Right.
is
And if you
very
weren't
encouraging.
and if you weren't there, they maybe wouldn't have anyone to ask that to, right? So
Right.
it's not even the case. It's not as important that not everyone is doing it. It's important that there are some that are coming to you and that they have you
Right.
to facilitate.